August 19th, 2024. Well, we have three issues in this video. First, the House report on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. The a little bit of a discussion of the state of the presidential race and the ongoing situation with the the Ukrainian invasion of Russia and the Ukraine war in general. Okay, first off, the Trump assassination attempt and the report that the House committee released on it. Some interesting points came up which will differ a little bit from the way I had discussed previously, but I was pretty much on target my previous things with a few minor changes. First of all, there really were only 8 shots fired by Kursk, the assailant, and then there were 2 shots. One by, it turns out, we now know it was one of the local state SWAT team snipers that fired that shot, and that's the one that stopped the attack, by the way. I'll explain that. And then following that, there was the final shot by the Secret Service sniper that killed Kursk. Okay, so that's essentially what we've learned there. Now, that's pretty much the same. Now, the difference is that the first 3 shots were the following. The first one clipped Trump's ear, kind of grazed it, caused him to bleed, and then it actually hit one of the people in the stands. Then there were 2 more shots, and this part I'm not sure exactly the order, but there was another person who was hit, but one of the 2 people who was hit with a second bullet, I think one in the arm and one in the torso. And so, there were 3 wounds that were 4 total wounds from the 3 shots, okay? Then after that, the Secret Service pretty much swarmed Trump and covered him. At that point, Kursk fired off 5 rounds. I'm not sure what he was aiming. Corey Companator, the fire chief, retired fire chief, was hit while trying to cover his family and killed. And then a hydraulic line was hit by one of the rounds. The other 3 apparently just passed over the area and didn't hit anybody. So that's basically how that all turned out on that. And then, as I said, first in the soundtrack, right after those 5 shots, the police sniper fired 1 round and apparently, as far as we can tell, hit his rifle stock and damaged the buffer tube, if you know anything how those particular weapons are constructed. And there's no evidence, as far as I know. We'll see when the autopsy report comes out, but it doesn't look like he was actually hit with a bullet. But apparently somehow it shattered the buffer tube, and that there were pieces of that hit him in the face and chest, and so that obviously stopped the assault right there. And then about a few seconds later, the Secret Service sniper then hit him and killed him. And so that was with the shooting. His attack was stopped because his rifle was essentially disabled by one of the rounds. So that kind of explains that. And obviously, when fragments of the buffer stock hit him, obviously that got his attention. So, and we pretty much know there was no ladder involved. They got up on the air conditioning and an area where they could climb up, and apparently a 68-year-old man was able to do the same climb. So maybe a bit more agile than myself, I don't know. But at any rate, the only thing I would think is, then how do I get down? Huh? If you get up there, you got to watch out when you climb things. Climbing can often be easier than getting back down safely. Anyhow, so we pretty much have dispelled the whole thing about the water tower, because police car was there at the base, seeing that nobody could get on it, and there was a 25-foot gap before the ladder was there. So unless you had your own ladder, that was out of the question. And so that basically is the rundown. But if you like these videos, please give me a like. I appreciate that, and it helps with the algorithm. We're looking for more subscriptions as always, and of course, click the bell for notifications if you're subscribed to YouTube. If you're on Rumble instead, you can. I post it there, and the address is in the description below. So anyhow, yeah. So that's about the way that turned out. Now, one of the issues is that apparently 10 days after the event, the FBI released the body to the family, and he was cremated. So it's going to be very difficult, I guess, that now whatever else investigation anybody might want to do involving the body and maybe what kind of substances was he on, some kind of a drug, for instance. Antidepressants sometimes lead to kind of psychotic behavior in a few rare cases, and so it could be one of those. And so that's kind of the highlights of all that. So it's not too much different from what I said earlier, but there's a few details that have been fleshed out and formalized. So anyway, so that's about that. Now the next issue I want to get into is the state of the race. And in the state of the race, I would point out that like I said in the last video, I think that maybe Harris maybe have kind of reached a peak, although of course the Democratic convention will be coming up on the 19th here. And that may give her another boost or not. And that I'll get into why that might be in a second. But the current state of the race is the real race, the Real Clear Politics average has both around 1% as a two-way, and the more realistic where you have the 3 of the 5 candidates. You've got of course, the 2 main ones, and then you've got RFK Jr., and you've got the Green candidate, and you have West as an independent. I guess as libertarian, but he's so far down, nobody's even paying attention this time. I would think libertarian do a little better. He's coming in 6th, I guess. He gets in the other category now. So at any rate, so the thing, it looks like in that case you have 1% to 1.1, almost the same. And of course, the other thing to look at is of course the competitive state races, which are probably the ones most likely that will actually decide the election, because the other ones, I think people are pretty confident how they're going to ultimately go. Maybe not in terms of percentage, but in terms of who the winner will be. So using the numbers, in other words, using the electoral map and simply using the whoever leads in the RCP battleground races, you end up with 252 for Harris and 267 for Trump, short of what it would take to win the election. And so, and right now, the Pennsylvania is tied flat out at 0. So, depending on how that goes, that's who wins the race. A narrower win for Harris, or a solid win for Trump, I guess you'd say, relatively. And so that's about that. Now, in that case, an interesting thing is that they're, I mean, for instance, if Trump were to win the independent race, I think in Maine, and the much less likely the Omaha, Nebraska district in Nebraska, I think that would give him 269, which could lead to an electoral tie, and it would go to Congress, the House and the Senate, to decide it. The Washington Post came out with their own electoral map. They didn't really, I don't know if they tied this, but I saw the map, and putting that in the system, you'll get 282 for Trump, and I think it's 256 for Harris, which would be a straight out Trump win in that case. So that's kind of the state of the race right now. It's going to change from time to time. Harris may well gain by the Democrat convention. On the other hand, depending on how the situation in the Middle East goes, and right now they're on the edge of a negotiation for a ceasefire, but it hasn't been finalized yet. And depending on how that goes, whether it's an Iranian attack, what Hezbollah does, that could lead to there's going to be a large pro-Hamas protest in Chicago, with the flag burning and all that sort of thing. So that could very well have an impact on the way the way the convention's perceived, whether it's going to be a plus or minus. So we'll have to take a look at that. In addition, of course, we have to look at her recent economic thing that just came out, and that's being criticized by both Democrats and, to some degree, and of course, totally by Republicans. Basically, this consists of a proposal for price controls for groceries. And given that grocery stores have one of the thinnest profit margins of any major industry, um, this doesn't sound like a very good idea, other than maybe driving grocery stores into bankruptcy and perhaps even, making certain items less available. I mean, we can get overboard on how devastating, but it's a really bad idea. And I thought it was kind of interesting that even one of Obama's economic advisors has spoken out against it, as well as the New York Times read an article. So I think this may be beginning to see that this is a weak candidate ultimately, and we'll have to see how that plays out. Of course, the other thing we have to watch out for too is, remember, as we go into the debates, and then right after the currently scheduled debate on the 10th of September, we'll have the sentencing of Trump on this New York case, and how that plays out may have certain impacts as well. We also have the ongoing, D.C. case on so-called election interference. And of course, that's been gutted by the Supreme Court ruling against the so-called Enron law. But on the other hand, there's still two very flaky charges left, and we don't know how that's going to proceed. But given the biased judge they have, we can expect it will continue. So that's kind of the situation on the race. We'll just have to keep tracking it. But I'm kind of hopeful that things will work out okay. We'll have to see on that. Now let's get on to the Ukraine invasion of Russia, which is a rather interesting development as we've been following. Well, basically, I think that the major advances seem to have come to a halt, although there's still probing attacks and so forth going on. However, if you look at the layout on that salient that they have penetrated into the Kursk region, it looks like on the eastern side of it, the Russians have brought in a naval infantry brigade and to reinforce this other unit that may have gotten pushed back a bit, and so they seem to put up a pretty strong defense and force the Ukrainians back on that front. On the north, it seems like that a pretty solid defense line is being built to protect Kursk and the nuclear plant. On the northeast side, the defenders of this town have been quite tenacious of hanging in there. And so far, that's a strategic goal for the Ukrainians, apparently. They've not been able to take it as of this recording. And then to the far west is a little bit more problematic, because while the Ukrainians may be ready to launch another assault, and that's where people think it will come if it does in the next few days, or maybe even tomorrow, maybe by the time this is seen by anybody. But the situation there is, if you go further over to the Ukrainian border, there's like a pocket there. And there's a large concentration of Ukrainian troops which may enter the fray at any moment. And so if Russia puts a light force in there to defend against the further advance, they might get trapped. And there's been some damage or destruction of bridges that would connect that area to the areas of the north where the Russian reinforcements and supplies will be coming from. On the other hand, if it can be adequately reinforced, maybe not so much. We just don't know how that's going to go, and the Russian air power is in play, and I think we're also beginning to see that and missile strikes are tending to destroy, for instance, allegedly the Ukrainians have lost maybe 3 HIMARS systems, which is a pretty critical part of their arsenal, to Russian missile strikes and air and drone strikes. And also, apparently, a large column of fuel trucks have been destroyed crossing in from the Ukrainian side into Kursk region, which were necessary to supply all those armored vehicles that they're using to run all over the place. So, like I said, it's beginning to look like the Russians are finally beginning to get a grip on it, but they could still have a nasty surprise or two awaiting in the days ahead until they really have it down. I mean, but the long run, I see this as kind of the Ukrainians have launched their own Battle of the Bulge. And the way I look at it is that, the Germans did good in the Battle of the Bulge for the first period of time, but they eventually ran into obstacles, and eventually they lost big time. And I think now one could argue that the Ukrainians could at this point just pull back into their own area and on their own sovereign territory and go on the defensive and then defy the Russians to follow up. They've done as much damage as they can and then get back, but somehow I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to stay in there until they really lose some forces. We'll see. Anyway, that's kind of my current analysis of that. Meanwhile, in the Donbass area, the Russians are like about about 10 kilometers, 11 kilometers from Pokros, which is this big hub where the rails and the roads all match together, kind of a hub that spokes out. That's very critical to support of all the frontline units the Ukrainians have in that area. If they lose that, it's going to really disrupt their logistics and put them in a bad place, and that might lead to further setbacks. So one does have to ask, why are they throwing some of their best forces into this Kursk offensive when in fact they're basically allowing the Russians to continue to advance in their strategic area. Now, we'll see how that plays out. There was also apparently a big ATACMS strike yesterday, I guess, the day before this was recorded, against the Kursk bridge, which apparently was ineffective. You need to use the unitary warheads, not the cluster warheads, to do any damage to the bridge, really, because the cluster bombs would destroy vehicles on the bridge, but not the bridge. So the unitary warheads have to actually directly hit the bridge also. So I don't know whether it was interceptions that stopped it or whether they simply missed the target. I mean, literally, if you're just a few feet off and don't actually hit the bridge and go in the water, it's a waste of time, If that's kind of the latest developments. So the Ukrainian offensive is still underway, and we'll have to follow developments. So anyway, I'll be wrapping this up for now. Of course, as always, I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble, and of course, the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. I most often post on X, but also on the others from time to time. I'll try to pick this up as the campaign develops, and so that'll be all for this until next time.